Hi to everyone who has joined. I'm Lindsey Messervy, be the one giving the webinar today. Just a couple housekeeping items. We are going to do the presentation and then take questions at the end. So if you do have a question at any point during the webinar, if you could put it in the questions box within the GoToMeeting control panel. We'll be collecting the questions there and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So with that, I guess I'll get started. So welcome, thanks for joining me today. This webinar is about supporting a human-centered approach to change and transformation. And it's focused on helping employees navigate organizational changes through COVID and beyond. As I said before, my name is Lindsey Messervy. I'm a senior organizational designer within MadPow's design transformation practice. And what we do is we work with teams and organizations to help them adopt more human-centered approaches to their work. So this is a relevant and exciting topic for me to explore with you today. So over the next 45 minutes, I'll be focusing on 3 goals for this webinar. The first is reflecting on where we are. So how the pandemic and other events in the past year or so have left us reeling from a state of crisis and how it's impacted the way that we work and the way that we live. Then I'm going to talk about an approach, specifically human-centered design, that is an effective way to help us find our footing again, think strategically and focus on our employees and what they need in order to navigate these ever-evolving circumstances. And then I'll be presenting some strategies and tactics specifically about how the principles of human-centered design can and have been applied to organizational changes to better support our workforce and employees now that we're coming out of this crisis mode and considering more long-term visions for how the way we work will change. On that note, I wanted to mention just a couple things about this webinar. So first, this is meant for people who are currently helping to coordinate or manage the employee experience. So that could be people within HR, people operations, or people within the employee experience department itself. This could also be leaders who are in charge of managing teams. But I'm also hoping that those who are here just to simply learn or who are interested in this topic can also take something away with you, especially because this is a timely and important topic in this day and age. And the other thing I wanted to note is that given that there's a lot of variables across the different capabilities and priorities of organizations you're each a part of, I'll be providing some general strategies. And I want to note that some of them may be more relevant for you and your organizations. Some might not be as relevant, and some you may already be doing. And if that's the case, that's awesome. But what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing some examples of tactics, both from what I've seen other organizations do, as well as things that we do within our own work within the design transformation practice. So if you'd like to go deeper into how your team or your organization can explore some of these ideas, we're always happy to talk. So please feel free to reach out. So again, I want to start by focusing on where we are. As we know, practically overnight, the COVID crisis has forced most organizations to fundamentally shift and rethink the way that day-to-day work gets done. And the pandemic has disrupted how we work and live. And we know that it may continue to do so, especially now that cases are rising and different cities and states are now exploring stay-at-home orders. And to that end, we've been living in this state of crisis and chaos for months. it's, you know, we've been living in this time where there's just been extreme uncertainty, and organizations and their leaders have had to use kind of a command and control approach to react quickly and efficiently in order to ensure that we're protecting both the business and our employees. And you can see that this mindset has come through through the several employee pulse surveys that were done in early April, back at the beginning of the pandemic. From this one that was done here, you can see that job security and personal health were top of mind for most employees. So they were most worried about making sure that their jobs were safe and that they were, you know, personally staying safe themselves. And this reflects what we tend to focus on when we're in the state of crisis or threat. We're focused on addressing the basic needs of safety, stability, and security. So making sure we're protecting our vulnerabilities and focusing on the aspects that will allow us to continue to exist, especially as a business not wanting to go under and lose our business and lose our employees. But we've started to move from the state of crisis and threat into a state of resilience and adaptability. We've been kind of leveling out and adjusting to the measures that we've taken to stay safe, stable, and secure, and that's allowed us to emerge, you know, out of this time of fear and anxiety, and start to look towards the present, really kind of understanding where we're at, what's working, what's not working, and look towards the future. And there are signs that we're moving into this phase, such as the findings from this survey that was done over the summer about the American worker. And you can see here that 84% of people who were surveyed said that they were satisfied with their organization's response to COVID. So they felt like the organization took steps to protect their job, and they felt safe and secure that way. But we also see some other impacts. 76% of workers say that the demands of their job have increased. So they are feeling the toll and the stress of having more work to do with less resources to do that with. 49% of workers have said that their mental health has declined. And 35% of workers say that their engagement with their organization has decreased. And so what that means when we think about our state of mind right now, we're left with increased rates of anxiety and depression, increased rates of substance abuse, more stress, both in terms of our personal and professional lives, dampened coping abilities, where we have less capacity to solve the problems that are continuing to arise in our personal and professional lives, and organizational and personal exhaustion, especially in the face of constant and never-ending change. Just having to navigate everything that's being thrown at us. So what do we do with this? Where do we go from here? As we move out of this crisis and threat mode that we've been in, again, we can move into a new phase where organizations can start to rethink the employee experience, refocus on that in order to recognize and support the people who have been doing the work through this time of turmoil, while still adapting to rapidly changing circumstances. Again, knowing that we're not out of the woods yet, things are still emerging and evolving, and so we have to be cognizant of that. And it seems that that actually, human resources and leaders at many organizations are seeing the need to focus their efforts on the employee experience. And you can see here from this survey that was done that the employee experience was at the top of the list for how HR leaders were expecting their function to change in 2020. So what does that look like for organizations? How do they move forward? Where do we go from here? So again, when we think about where we were in that state of survival, where we were just supporting operations through disruptions, trying to get us through day to day and making sure we still existed as a business, as an organization. From there, we can move into reimagining, refocusing on what's needed to thrive again, specifically focusing on the aspects that will help us get out of those negative impacts and mental states that I mentioned before, which means focusing on building trusting relationships that demonstrate care for people whose lives have been disrupted. That means focusing on social cohesion. So thinking about how we can reshape our culture to ensure that people can do their best work through collaboration, empowerment, partnership, and collective focus. So really trying to bring people together towards a common goal again. And we can focus on activating individual purpose. We know that people are yearning to find meaning in their work, especially now more than ever. They've been wondering, why am I doing what I'm doing? How am I improving the world? How is the organization I work for improving the world? And why does my work matter? And once we reimagine, once we kind of understand what's needed to thrive again, we can move into redesigning. So determining the processes and the systems that can be sustained through COVID and beyond. Again, we have fundamentally changed the way that we work, and there's really no going back to the way things were. So this is an opportunity to rethink how we can ensure our business is sustained and our employees are supported. And so we can start to explore, what has been working that we would want to keep as we eventually move out of this pandemic. Or what would we want to rework or rethink? Maybe that was a quick fix or a band-aid to a problem that we needed to implement quickly, but has shown to actually have some value. Or what do we need to stop or fundamentally change based on the shifts in our beliefs, our values, our culture, our society, and our overall needs? And this is where we believe human-centered design can come into play as an approach to how we solve this. So human-centered design is an approach to creating solutions for problems and opportunities by focusing on the needs, the context, the behaviors, and the emotions of the people that our solutions will serve. It really starts by focusing on people rather than focusing on or starting with the structures, the operations, the processes, or the solutions themselves. It really puts people up and their needs at the center of everything that you're exploring. And because of this focus on people, coming back to what we just talked about and what we need to be doing right now, it can recognize and support the people doing the work. It can help to understand and find ways to explore how to rebuild the softer skills around trusting relationships, social cohesion, and individual purpose to make sure that our organizations are thriving through our employees. And we can use it to continue to adapt and respond to rapidly changing circumstances. That's really what it was built to do, and we can see that through the actual process. You can see here, if you're familiar with design or design thinking, you've probably come across a lot of these different types of models. But human-centered design is meant to, it was built to use a series of phases to move from a particular problem or need through to an idea, to explore, what might be possibilities, to build and explore prototypes or mock-ups or simulations of what that idea could feel like or be like or look like, into how we might build, deploy, and launch that. And as you can see, each phase consists of a divergent phase and convergent phase. So we're iteratively exploring wide possibilities before narrowing down to a best route forward. And I did want to point out that you know, every good human-centered design approach always has a tie back to the beginning. Again, knowing that it's an iterative process. It's meant to be building upon the learnings and insights and allows us to keep learning and adjusting based on what we're finding. So if we find that what we're doing isn't having the impact that we want it to, we go back to the beginning and start over. Maybe not the beginning, maybe you can also go back to one of the other areas as well. But really it's meant to be that approach that allows us to be iterative, continually adapt and build upon what we're learning. And so human-centered design, the way that it was built, the way that it was imagined and deployed, typically it's used for customer-focused lens. So using it as a way to build solutions or products or services or experiences for the customers that we're trying to reach. But it can also be applied with an internal employee-focused lens. So thinking about what Alan, the new hire, needs, or Boz, the manager, needs to do his job well or to progress or to thrive in the organization. And at MadPow, we use this approach when we work with organizational design problems. So you see here, we use different phases and methodologies to help discover, assess, strategize, execute, and revisit ways that we can help organizations adopt new practices. You can see here all of the different methods and tools that we would use. But I wanted to point out are on the bottom here some of the core tenets and the principles of how we approach this work. And we do this through focusing on culture and behavior. So looking beyond rules, processes, and hierarchy to understand the relationships, the perspectives, the motivations of employees and of team members. We use co-creation. So this is about bringing people into the process, collaborating with them closely to make sure that the people who are going to be impacted, the employees or the team members, will be part of building the solution itself, because we know that people are more inclined to change, to actually kind of implement and use whatever we're designing or building when they're empowered in the design and decision-making process itself. And we also bring in iteration and support, knowing that change requires persistence and adaptation, because we know that not all efforts will work immediately and work perfectly. And so we need to approach them knowing that they'll shift as we learn more about what's actually working and not working. And so again, I use this as a way to show that human-centered design can be applied when we think about the employee experience, when we think about our own organizations looking internally. And we know that other organizations are also using the approach of human-centered design to think through the employee experience. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. So how do we actually take those core tenets of human-centered design and apply them to the employee experience? So here, I'm going to break down 4 key principles of the human-centered design approach, and talk about a couple strategies or recommendations that you might be able to use with your team or your organization. And I'll also bring in some examples of how other organizations have used this process, this approach, to reimagine and recreate the employee experience. So first, I'll outline the 4 principles, just so we can all kind of see what they are and be accustomed to them. But I'll dig into each one of them in a little bit more detail shortly. So the first one is building empathy. So this is about sensing and responding to the needs of your employees, really understanding what they need, what their desires are, what their expectations are. Making sense of the learning. So as you're learning about the needs, how do you identify insights that are actionable, that you can do something with, and where there might be opportunities for impacting and creating a better employee experience. The third principle is focusing on real outcomes. So being very intentional and clear about what you're trying to achieve and making sure you're testing that through testing solutions with employees themselves. So again, bringing in that idea of co-creating and designing with people who are going to be at the center of what you're designing. And then finally, engaging in continuous learning. Again, thinking about that iterative, continuous process of seeing change as a journey that doesn't just stop once you put something out there into the world, but it has to be continued to be nurtured and to learn from it to make sure it's actually having the impact that you have intended it to. So let's start with building empathy. Again, this is about sensing and responding to the needs of your employees. So the first thing is to improve your listening techniques, to explore the influences, contexts, triggers, and constraints that are impacting people's experiences. And we can think about these different aspects that are happening both within and outside of the work context, because we know that people's work and personal lives are blended together now more than ever before. So it's important to ensure that we're getting a holistic picture of all of these different influences that might be impacting not only their experience, but their also their ability to work. And it does seem like, based on what's been happening, it seems that a lot of organizations have been upping their game in this area, that they've been taking steps to reach out to employees more. And we've heard about some leaders even going so far as to have one-on-one conversations with every single employee in their organization, which, if you're an organization of thousands, that can be a little bit tricky, but it shows the increase in thinking about the needs and the expectations and challenges that employees are going through and how leaders are responding to that. What I did want to point out is that it's important, while we have been improving our listening techniques overall, it's good to think about the different ways that we can listen and tap into what's going on. And so, there are different listening techniques or ways that we can get at what someone says they do and think. And these are usually, this is usually done through interviews, surveys, or focus groups. These are typically what we use to get a pulse on what's going on. And while they can be effective tools, they can also be limited in getting deep into the latent needs that people have. So beyond what they think they need, beyond what they consciously are thinking about, about what they need or their expectations. And that's where some additional techniques can help, where we can get a bit deeper into what's actually going on, even understanding or uncovering things that people might not be aware that they need. So when we think about what someone actually does, we can identify that through using workplace data or observational techniques, or immersion into real life context, sitting in on kind being part of conversations that happen in the hallway, being kind of looking for the behaviors that are actually happening. And then we can also think about what someone really thinks and feels, which can be discovered through meaningful human connections and conversations. immersion into their own lives. And this is where it's helpful to think about what are the right people for uncovering these deeper insights and learnings. Will people be as open as they are with their boss or the head of the company versus their work friend or their close colleague who they feel more comfortable divulging certain things that might feel a little bit more uncomfortable talking to your boss about? And you could also explore where or when these conversations take place. Can you get at some of these deeper insights through having more informal conversations versus more formal means, such as a scheduled interview or a scheduled check-in? So a technique here, if you want to explore this, is to have a dual interview between a close colleague and their friends. So when you interview them together, they can feel more safe and secure to share when another person shares their own views. Or having a close colleague actually be the one who interviews their friends, so the conversation feels a little bit more casual and personable. And so as you look at this list, you can ask yourself, is your organization or is your team more heavy in one, or is it covering all three pretty effectively? Does it tap into insights that all three of these different areas covers? Another way to build empathy is to watch for signals around the three key areas that will help your employees and organization thrive. So again, thinking about whether trusting relationships are still there, are still apparent. Do people still have that close work friend that they share with and they talk with, or are they feeling more isolated, more disconnected from others? Social cohesion, do they feel like they are working together effectively and collaboratively with others, where they feel like they're really in it together with people? Or are they feeling left on their own without some sense of support? And then you can focus on individual purpose. So do people feel like they have meaning through their work? Are they contributing to something that feels bigger than themselves? So making sure, as you're exploring and improving your listening techniques, focusing on those three areas, especially during this time, is important. And then finally, supporting bi-directional communication channels and processes. So that means ensuring information is being gathered and shared up, down, and across the organization, which makes it, it makes information sharing much more fluid than before, which usually just happens kind of top down, or it's a one-way conversation channel from the executive level to the employees. An example that we've explored is a technology company who wanted to support more information sharing across the organization. They wanted to make it less formalized, where they typically would share out a report from the leadership team and make it more in the moment and more emergent. And so they use Slack channels to crowdsource tips from employees to make suggestions and best practices public. So using it as a way to empower people to share their creative ideas that others were trying. And from this, the leadership team can learn a little bit more about what was working and not working directly from people themselves in a way that feels a little bit more informal and casual and less, less like a report or a reporting structure. So a couple things to consider in thinking about how to build empathy. The next principle that we'll talk about is making sense of learning. So again, this is about identifying actionable insights and opportunities for impact. So how do we take all of this data that we've uncovered through our listening techniques and figure out what it means? So first, making sure that there's a platform or a way or a method for acting quickly if needed. And this sounds a bit like a no-brainer, but we found that this is a critical step that can sometimes be overlooked. So when we are improving or bolstering our listening techniques, we also need to bolster our ability to respond in a timely and appropriate way. So as you're gathering data, how can you ensure that critical insights and actions aren't delayed in the typical administrative process? Can you bypass it in some way, or can you make sure it's rapid enough to act upon quickly? Are there ways that your team or your organization can quickly act upon what you're hearing, especially if it's impacting the livelihood of employees, to address it quickly and effectively? And even just a simple way of saying, we hear that this is going on and we're working to address it quickly will help provide some transparency that employees' concerns were heard. Another strategy is developing personas for your employees as you would your customers. So we know that personas are typically used with when we think about customers and their needs. So we group customers with similar traits, experiences, behaviors, and expectations as a way to develop new solutions or strategies that are more tailored towards them. But we can also apply this method to how we think about our employees to drive a more positive experience. And we know that throughout COVID, people have widely varied across their experiences, their perspectives, and the outcomes that they've had. Some people are struggling while others are thriving. And their challenges, their needs, and their desires vary depending on their classification. For instance, thinking about what a manager needs versus a non-manager, or the challenges that a parent is experiencing versus someone who's living alone, isolated, or the remote worker versus the essential worker who has to go into the workplace. So to build on that a little bit, again, to define personas, they're archetypes of people that describe patterns of behaviors, needs, goals, expectations, and knowledge, so we can better design solutions for them. And what we found is typically employee-based personas focus on segmenting people by their job roles or trajectory. And so you can see here, this company had the personas of the employee, the typical employee, the new hire, the international employee, the manager, the external employee. So it's a fine way to categorize people, since each one is coming in with different expectations, goals, needs, and sets of expertises. But we should also consider exploring what we call behavioral or behavior-based personas that focus on differences between people's behaviors and attitudes and motivations, especially since COVID has shifted people's values and openness to various solutions. For instance, studies have found that people are now valuing flexibility over their work and their work schedule, over career advancement, which didn't happen before. That's something new that has been emerging. And also people are valuing diversity and inclusion and finding them much more important now than they were before the pandemic. So you can see here, the behavior-based personas, these ones were developed to address differences in how people think about returning to the workplace. So you can imagine someone who's a ready resumer might have different needs, expectations, desires, or possible solutions than the anxious evaluator, who might be holding back a bit and needing more research done before they feel ready to go back into the office. So again, to reiterate, while the job role version of personas help focus on the technical or functional aspects of needs, for instance, we know that a new hire will need more support or hand-holding until they transition into a more traditional employee. they may not get behind the deeper drivers for people's individual behaviors. So why does one new hire more readily accept one type of help versus another? And that's where behavioral personas can come in. And as a quick plug, if you're interested in learning more about behavioral personas, my MadPow colleagues have some great articles and webinars on this topic, so feel free to explore those. Another strategy to help make sense of learnings is to organize insights across the employee journey to aid in understanding, identifying, and prioritizing opportunities. So when we think about personas, we think about them as characters in a story, and a journey map is kind of like the plot. So how that character navigates different challenges, or how they might react to certain situations. And by plotting out the journey, by understanding, kind of plotting it out holistically and end to end, it allows us to understand where their experience might fall short, or where there are critical moments that might set a person up for one path or another within the organization. But more importantly, it can help to identify where there's opportunities to improve the experience. And here, journeys are, as I said, a story about the relationship and resulting experience that unfolds over time between an individual, so an employee, and a system, a service, a product, or the organization itself. Here we've broken down the types of information that that journey maps generally contain. So you can see here at the top is the stage or phase of the journey that they're going on. And then you typically include employees, or the employee or the user, their thoughts and emotions, the path that they take, and their actions and thoughts. And so it really tries to take into account what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're feeling. So you're really immersed in their experience and their expectations, their needs, and everything that is happening internal to them. And again, the key piece here is highlighting opportunities. And opportunities are really where there are opportunities to help shape or improve the experience. And what we do is we typically understand opportunities when there are gaps between what people's expectations and needs are and what the reality of the journey or the experience is. The benefit to journey maps are they're a great way to visualize the full experience, so everyone can have a shared understanding of what is actually happening. And it serves for better storytelling than just reading a report. It's something that people can interact with and reflect on. And it reveals some of those unexpected or unforeseen insights and opportunities. Again, looking for those gaps between what actually happens and what people are expecting. An example of how this actually has been implemented, an employee at a bank insurer recognized an issue when people needed to, he recognized a gap when people needed to call in sick to work, but they had to go through multiple levels of reporting structures to alert the right people in the right way. And this sometimes took up to 30 minutes, which is a long time, especially when you're sick, when you want to stay in bed and don't want to have to talk to people. So he built a quick and easy way to address this simple problem by creating an app, a basic reporting app that allows you to solve that problem in 20 seconds or less. And they tested this app with people. They eventually evolved it to address other basic gaps that they found in the employee experience. So, for instance, when a piece of tech is broken in a room, they can instantly report it instead of having to go through levels of bureaucratic reporting. Using the experience to highlight gaps is great there. Another way to use journey maps there's some organizations that are taking a more advanced or sophisticated approach where they're actually using an agile methodology to assign improvement teams to each part of the journey. So taking recruiting and onboarding and bringing together a multidisciplinary team to map out that process and understand where there's gaps are, where they can improve the process. Or another journey is getting paid. What happens if that goes wrong or gets broken? Or another journey is leaving the company and how that works. So there's a lot of possibilities that you can explore with mapping the employee journey. I wanted to next talk about the third principle of focusing on real outcomes. So this is, again, being intentional about what you want to achieve and testing solutions with employees. So this is really about ensuring that we're super clear with the impact that we're intending to have, being laser focused on that, and ensuring that our solutions are achieving that. So strategy here is bringing people into the conversation and the design of the solution. That is, if they have the capacity. Again, knowing that people are already stressed and overworked, being cognizant of that. But this brings back, again, the opportunity to think about co-creating with employees. So, what we found is that it by bringing people into the design, it helps to connect to what matters most to people. Not only does this help to give new, unique insights about the issues that are important to them, it empowers them and puts the tools for change in their hands. And that's where we find that the long-term change can happen more easily and more fluidly, because they're bought in, they're creating the solution themselves, so they're more bought into it. And especially if others know that, hey, this was built with others like us, then they're more inclined to be bought into the change. An example that we found is that a financial planning company designed a new onboarding program where the content is 100% crowdsourced from people who recently joined the company. So people who, the new hires, they actually asked them to create a little video vignette about their experience or what they found helpful, which actually, apparently it got great success. It was used a lot, and people really accepted it well. So again, just quick ways of bringing people into the conversation and design. Another way to focus on outcomes is developing a minimum viable prototype. We usually talk about MVP as a minimum viable product, but thinking about a prototype to build the smallest, fastest thing that will test the core of your hypothesis. So if you have an idea, making sure that that whatever you're putting out there is actually being true to what you expected or your assumptions. And so a lot of the time when we do this work, we call these change experiments in our own work, in our organizational design work. It's similar to how we think about testing, learning, and iterating in a design approach. And the reason why we frame them as experiments is that it's just a lightweight way of exploring an idea, and it's a way to generate additional learning about whether we're moving in the right direction with our idea. So to be most successful, we like to start with the ideas that will harness the most, will harness and work with the energy and motivation of the team or the organization. So, making sure we're piloting ideas where they're most likely to be successful to get that buy-in and to test it quickly. Just to kind of define what we mean by minimum viable prototype, it's a simulation or a sample version of a final product, service, or solution that will help us learn from and evolve concepts before sinking a lot of time or money or energy into the final product. And here you can see, it can be as simple as a quick little mock-up of a phone app, or it could be, wireframes for a website or some piece of content that you might get, where it can turn into something a little bit more refined later on. And again, it allows you to fail in a more cost-effective way. It saves money down the line. And it puts something tangible and interactive into people's hands, so you can get actionable and direct feedback quickly. And while the examples I show here are more physical or digital products, you can also prototype other types of solutions as well. For example, a large tech company wanted to develop a workforce insights platform that would help leaders make more informed decisions about their team. Gathering insights, giving them back to the leaders so they can figure out how to make sure their employees are healthy, happy, and productive. And so to start, they identified the area that they felt was most, one of the most costly pain points, which is identifying employees who were at risk of leaving the organization. So the team would prepare reports for these managers, along with specific recommendations to help retain those employees. And not only were they able to use this quick and easy way of getting useful and timely insights about what worked and didn't work, especially because they could use the outcome of whether the employee left or not as a basis, but it also created a lot of goodwill with the managers so they can start building more buy-in for the solution organically. And then the final principle is engaging in continuous learning. So this is really about seeing change as a continuous iterative journey. So some tactics here, or some strategies here, are to keep a continuous pulse on what's happening and what's emerging. Again, knowing that things are changing, making sure we are continuing to have an ear to the ground and to identify new challenges or needs or opportunities that may arise and organizing around them. Revisiting assumptions about what's working. Because things are changing, both inside the organization and externally in the world, we shouldn't treat anything as a given or static. We should always continue to, again, kind of keep a pulse on what's happening and what's emerging. And then monitor how initiatives or solutions may be unexpectedly impacting aspects of organizational behavior or culture. And I wanted to highlight an interesting example here. This is an organization that basically layered on everything that we just talked about, like using a real-time dashboard of the employee experience. And what they've produced here is basically a way of managing the experience, or we call it experience management. So how an organization manages, coordinates, and measures experiences across touch points, channels, products, and services. And so if you can read it here, they include the different personas that they've identified for their employees, the successes and pain points and moments that matter for each of those personas across the journey. They have qualitative data or quantitative data about what employees actually do. And here they're actually tracking web page interactions, so using workplace data to input there. They also track quantitative data about what people say or do via survey results. And they have a way to prioritize usage and impact across the different personas and touch points to identify where are their high priority areas to focus our efforts on. And so if you can consider using some kind of dashboard like this, again, it's a more involved piece of work, but as you gather new data, you're using this as a real-time sensing and responding engine to identify where you can focus your efforts. So it's a great way of, again, keeping a pulse on what's happening, being able to iterate and tailor where you're focused on according to the data that's coming in. So I know we're almost at the end of the time, I believe. So to recap, as we round this corner out of crisis mode, we can begin to refocus on what's needed for us to thrive, both as employees and as an organization. So this means starting to focus internally on the individual and collective needs and challenges of our employees, and focus on rebuilding relationships, cohesion, and purpose. Again, coming back to those three critical items that will help support us, like kind of get us past this crisis mode into a place where we can feel more resilient and more adaptable. And establishing approaches that will help us adapt to rapidly changing circumstances within and outside of our organization. Again, exploring human-centered design as a methodology to use to really get at the core of what people need, and continuing to iterate on the learnings that we get from that. So by reimagining and redesigning our organizational systems, processes, and practices, we can reshape how work gets done to better support our employees through COVID and beyond. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to join, and I'm happy to take any questions or anything that you'd like to know. Okay, I see a couple here. Okay. So we have a question. Given healthcare delivery systems are still in the intense period of caring for the current surge of patients, command and control phase, what insights can you share about how managers can help their teams heal from this traumatic period in the next 6 to 12 months? That's a great question. So if I'm understanding correctly, what can we do about how managers can help their teams heal from this traumatic period? Again, I keep coming back to this idea of building trusting relationships, social cohesion, and individual purpose. And it almost seems a little bit too simplistic given what care teams have been going through. But if there's ways to help them connect to one another, to help process what has been going on for them, and to connect back to their purpose and the huge impact that they have had on both their individual patients' lives and how they're caring for society. I guess that as not being a therapist, that's my best answer, is just, again, connecting back to kind of humanity. But when they're ready, I think from what I understand, a lot of them are burnt out and going through all of this emotional trauma. So trying to be cognizant of that, understanding their readiness to dig into those areas a bit more. But I'm hopeful that, I think we're all hopeful that we can all come out of this crisis mode, especially for our healthcare workers and our care workers. I have another question. Have you worked with any government agencies who are trying to help their employees cope with the impact of the pandemic? So we haven't worked specifically with government agencies. We have worked with some other organizations, especially looking at how to rebuild relationships and cohesion in order to, especially because so many employees are working remotely, how do you foster that sense of connection and purpose and relationships and collaboration through a computer, through a screen? when people are so used to collaborating more informally, or they're kind of losing that sense of kind of that informal collaboration and connection. And so we have done some recent work with organizations around that topic and exploring some different tools and technologies and practices that that they can implement and use to, again, to rebuild those critical pieces that we know are very important for making sure our employees are thriving right now. And another question, has your work with clients shown how companies are improving collaboration despite work from home being the new normal? Well, it talks a little bit about what I just talked about, you know, how we've been exploring remote work and how to best support people and explore new technologies and tools that way. But it's a hard thing. I think a lot of, we know that meeting burnout is big, and it's hard to separate out, you know, our work lives from our personal lives. And so setting up, you know, the right boundaries, the right places for recharging ourselves, and making sure we're supporting, you know, the conversations that need to happen without making it a burden. So yes, we have done some work there, as I mentioned. So regarding, one more question, regarding experience management, how is employee input collected and how often? How often or how long is the feedback loop in making it real time? That is a great question. It all depends on the capabilities of the organization itself. I think, you know, in very advanced or sophisticated organizations, they have data coming in, you know, all the time, especially if they have a way of collecting workplace data about how people are using certain applications or things that can be tracked pretty easily. The harder part is the more qualitative data that you can find, you know, how often to send out, you know, pulse surveys to people, how often to do interviews with people, how often to use some of the other listening techniques that we talked about. So I think it all comes back to the capabilities of the organization and what you're hoping to achieve with the data. Is it a way to be able to track kind of across the whole organization how things are going, or is it to track, it could be used to track a particular initiative, in which case you might want to get more frequent rounds of feedback and data. So again, the answer is it varies, but I think, you know, I would just suggest, again, going at the pace or the readiness of the organization in which you work in. Do you have the capabilities and capacities to gather more information without making it a burden on, you know, on the people who are doing the work or the employees themselves for, you know, getting multiple surveys, and making sure that you know, that it's being used for a particular purpose. A lot of times we find that organizations can collect all of this different, you know, they have so much data. The question is, how do you actually do something with it? How are you able to parse out the particular insights that are actionable and critical to what you need? And that's I'd say, in some ways, that's the harder part, is to parse through it all and to make sense of it. So again, thinking about your capacity to do that. And I think we're over time, so thank you all. If you want a copy of this this presentation, you'll be receiving an email, a follow-up email, and the presentation will be included on that. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good day.